We on? Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Alex Joseph. I'm the managing editor of FIT's Hue Magazine, and I want to welcome, oh, thank you. Bring it. All right, calm down. I want to welcome you all to a celebration of really one of FIT's greatest alumni. Actually, two of FIT's greatest alumni. Let's get that right. And I want to thank Tanya Melendez Escalante, the senior curator of education and public programming for the museum, and the museum itself for putting this evening together. And I just want to make one little point, which is that Antonio and Juan actually spoke on this stage. If you're out there, feel free to come home, as it were. So now is just a good time to point out that if you go to the museum at FIT, which is free, you can actually see Antonio's on the wall in the Trapphagen exhibition, which is upstairs, and reproductions of other Antonios in the exhibitionism show downstairs. Now, so this is how the evening is going to go. I am going to say just a couple of things about the movie. Then we'll show the movie itself, which is about 90 minutes. I will conduct a Q&A of 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes or so with our guests. And then I'm going to open it up so we hear some questions from you guys. Okay? We're good? All right, good. So about 18 years ago, when I had just come to FIT and I was working on alumni publications for the college, somebody in college relations handed me a photograph of Grace Jones naked in a bathtub, torn out of a magazine, and she said, "That's by Antonio. He's one of our most famous alumni." And I thought, okay, he's a photographer, which is sort of true. And then a little later, this same person started telling me about this book called Antonio's Girls, which was about women that Antonio admired, loved, and nurtured in their careers. So I had the impression that Antonio was a talent scout, which was also sort of true. And then maybe a year or so later, someone said, well, you know, all those Antonio drawings that you're looking at, they're actually the product of two people. It's Antonio and Juan Ramos. So then I was really confused. And I'd like to suggest that the confusion of categories is sort of appropriate for Antonio Lopez, an artist around whom themes and people and stories and milieus swirled in a kind of boundary confounding mix, and maybe in a way that isn't quite possible now. But let's clear away any misconceptions. Okay, Antonio was a fashion illustrator. He drew for the fashions of the times, Vogue, GQ, Interview, European publications such as Depeche Mode, and Anna Piaggi's very influential Vanity magazine. And he also drew for department stores like Bloomingdale's. And one model told me that, in fact, one of Antonio's models told me that sometimes the drawings were too good for commercial publication, for commercial work. And she said, you know, he had done this drawing as an ad for lingerie, and customers actually brought in the lingerie that they had purchased and complained, because they said, this drawing makes it look like this magnificent work of art, and what you've sold me is a schmata. Antonio also worked with designers like Charles James and Karl Lagerfeld, and maybe our guests can talk to us a little bit about what those collaborations were like. He was an artist without a set style, and for this protean ability, one curator actually referred to him as the Picasso of illustration. Sometimes his drawings looked like Edward Hopper, and sometimes they looked like Salvador Dali. Sometimes they looked like his own. So this wide range of possibilities. And not that we're keeping score here, but he is sometimes referred to as the most influential curator of the second half of the 20th century, and I've even seen him referred to as the most influential, fashion illustrator of all time. But what is really not in any dispute at all is the changes that he helped bring about in the field of fashion illustration. In 1962, when Antonio left FIT and started working at Women's Wear Daily, the typical fashion illustration was usually of a sort of staid white woman with no background, and she was in a sort of frozen pose. But Antonio and Juan really helped change the field so that you started to see that they were inspired by the street. They were inspired by ordinary women, unusual looking women, women of color. There were people roller skating, riding motorcycles in their drawings. So, and he sort of brought a fine art sensibility to this field that was unusual. But I'd like to suggest that Antonio was, for fashion, something greater than any single illustration or series of illustrations could really capture. He really created a mood, an environment, a scene, something that's more powerful than any single individual, and at the same time maybe more fragile than anybody at that time or even this time could completely understand. Okay, let's watch the movie and then we'll have some questions.
You had to watch Antonio as he was drawing. He was breathing, like he was pulling the magic right out of the atmosphere. And it was coming out through his fingers on the drawing pad.
And then he'd look at you and take you in. And then, oh, you couldn't wait for him to look at you again. But you know he's holding his breath till he gets that stroke down. It's like...
But Antonio, when he's drawing, always had an audience around him. He fed on it.
He was so far ahead of his time. He was in another century. It was just beyond belief what he created.
Antonio's aesthetic is beyond, it's like fantastic. So in his field, he's a giant.
Until he came along, a fashion drawing was just like a very stiff couture model. Antonio put them in a fantasy. He brought this whole new style to fashion.
I think everybody at that time got swept up into Antonio's world. There was something magical about it. He was this magician in the center of fashion. Everything was fluid, the way he moved. Everything was movement, everything was music, everything was dancing.
He was an incredible flirt. He was so good at it. And he flirted with everybody. Nobody was spared.
He was the kind of person that was non-discriminating about who you were, the kind of person you were. He was extremely seductive, extremely romantic. If you were in his crosshairs, you were the target of his attention and therefore helpless.
Let me introduce the guests. Paul Caranicas is a painter. He was educated at Georgetown, the Corcoran, and the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He's been in a huge list of group and solo shows. He's also the executor of the Antonio Estate. The painter Walter Robinson called Paul, quote, an ecological artist whose paintings warn of the depredations of civilization as they celebrate the triumphs of engineering and design. Paul, come on up. Have a seat. Vogue described Corey Grant Tippen as the notorious 70s model, Warhol makeup artist, and Sticky Fingers cover muse. And if you're a youngest person who doesn't know that the Sticky Fingers album cover is kind of legendary, you should Google that right away. You know, I just want to say there are not enough male muses in the world. Can we get some, right? There's just not enough of them. He also has a decorating and antiques business that's been featured in Oprah's magazine, among many other places. Corey, come on up. Andre Leon Talley described our next guest as the first supermodel. Pat Cleveland is a legendary muse, model, and African-American trailblazer in fashion. She has modeled for simply too many designers for me to list, but she's also been photographed by Irving Penn, Stephen Meisel, Richard Avedon, Christopher Makos, and Andy Warhol. She also recently authored a book, Walking with the Muses, for Simon & Schuster. Pat Cleveland, could you come on up? Picture of me. How is he? Oh, sure, absolutely. Did you? It's a little magic, a little buttons. There we go.
Oh, thanks.
Why not? How are you doing over there? We good?
High tech.
Okay, so I'll ask a few intrusive and obnoxious questions, and then the audience, I think they're going to hand me questions from you guys, but if not, I'll just see if someone wants to ask a question. All right, so why don't we start with, can I just ask, now watching this movie, obviously it's not the first time you've seen this thing, but you know, watching it, what do you think? Does it accurately capture something, this experience, what it was like, what Antonio was like?
My heart is beating so fast. I'm sitting with these two guys, and, you know, we're sitting there watching the film and looking at each other like, oh my God, did that really happen? Did we really have that encounter? Was our life so full and vivid? And, you know, we're still doing stuff, but we're just missing one of our buddies, and a lot of them, actually. But still, you know, there's a lot of feelings that you never get over, the excitement of being in the presence of other creative people who are young and spontaneous, and you just want to carry that feeling on. So I feel like we're carrying on, you know. We're still carrying on the
Yeah, I mean, you have your own careers, you have other things that you've done. But what did you think about the movie as a movie? Good? Yeah. Were you surprised when you saw it? What?
No.
No, okay.
No, I wasn't surprised. You mean tonight or first time?
No, I mean like when you first saw it, like the way it was put together. I mean, it's very.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was good, and it definitely captured the '60s and the '70s. It brought out everything that I remember. It was sometimes it seemed to repeat itself, but. You know, I'm not a movie critic, but that's one thing that bothered me about it. James isn't here tonight, the director, so I can say things that I wouldn't say if he were.
Bring it on, say it.
Well, he's probably going to see this because you're recording it, but it was a great experience to do the film. It took 5 years, and it was obviously a labor of love. But I think, all in all, it turned out pretty well. So,
Corey, what do you think?
So Pat and I sat on the stage together probably 10 years ago?
Not even.
Put close to your mouth. So
7 years ago, because there's sort of the genesis of all this, where the Padilla brothers did a book called Antonio, actually Sex, Fashion, and Disco, which has a very similar title to James's movie. Shout out to James and Ronnie Sassoon, who are not here, wish they were. They're in LA, probably working on their next picture. But through that experience of that book, collectively, all of us that were once part of this group kind of dynamically sort of came together again, and we all shared those of us who were left, and we all shared our experiences. And they all were what I remembered.
Exactly.
But it's strange because I remembered it in a sort of isolated way. I was playing the tapes in my own mind. And then to see that it actually happened, to see it on film, that no, it's true. It's kind of amazing in my lifetime to have that kind of document. I'm just a witness. I just happen to be there. But we're like magnets, I feel. Like we all sort of had this magnetism, and we were just kind of pulled together. I mean, I remember when Pat was in high school, and I didn't know her yet, but I knew Donna, who went to the same High School of Art and Design, and I was like, who's that girl? And they said, oh, that's Pat Cleveland. I was like, is she a model? And they were like, not yet, but I was like, I could just see the future, and it sort of played out that way. And I think your question before about James, James is a movie maker, James Crump, the director, and he's an outsider. So he saw this in a very objective way, which is interesting because you're seeing it through James's perception of what happened.
Yeah,
I mean, there is a sort of a reality, and it's very, like Pat said, her heart was beating. I mean, I've seen this movie, 7, 8 times, and it's just, every time I watch it, it's, extremely like an emotional roller coaster, especially with Carl now being gone, and, just the people's observations that I didn't notice each time. It just sort of, for us, egotistically, it's a very powerful film. I don't know how it plays for other people, but I'm sure people that are interested. Yeah. Push it up.
Oh. Is there another mic that we could get, maybe?
I got pads. Okay. It's very hard to tell. I don't know how you all feel watching the movie. It's I've seen it 10 times, and I don't know what it looks like to other people. It's a very surreal experience, like Corey said, to actually have lived it and then watch your life in pictures. So I think, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. If you imagine somebody were making a film of your life throughout the last 30 or 40 years, and then you saw it, think of that. It would be shocking.
Is there anything that you felt like should have been in there and wasn't?
Well, I think the part that really bothers me the most is that the educational aspect of Juan Antonio's oeuvre in general was not stressed at all. Because James Crump, who made the movie, is a real fan. He's like, it's sort of from the view of somebody who grew up idolizing Juan Antonio. He's a Midwestern guy. He says this himself when we're on the stage together, and he always wanted to, he lived for when Interview would come out or when Antonio's illustrations would appear in the newspapers. So I think from that point of view, it's a great movie because you get to see it
totally
in that way, right?
Totally.
I know that, Alex, you do your movie reviews, which I often
do.
Well, they're reverse reviews. They're like
the movies I don't want to see.
Yes.
Yeah. I usually do just a 1 second. Like, this is a movie I don't want to see, but this I did want to see.
Yeah.
I was wondering. There's. I noticed that Betty Davis, the singer, is not in this. She was in. It was a part of Antonio and Juan's 70s experience, Betty Davis, and she was very close for about a year and a half. But she for some reason it was omitted. You can't get everything in. Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I just was wondering. I mean, and I know she's a little reserved too. Also, I don't know if she made.
Well, now she is. She wasn't back then.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if anybody knows. If you don't know Betty Davis's work, you should also. That's another thing that you should Google.
Yeah, absolutely.
Betty Davis, AKA Betty Maybury.
Yeah,
great.
And she's one of the best dancers, hands down, that I have ever seen in my life or danced with. Besides Pat Cleveland, of course.
Oh, thank you.
And she was married to Miles Davis, who's a great jazz musician, of course. And on her own right, she held her own. She's amazing. So if you get a chance, listen to her songs.
You also mentioned vanity in your
Yes.
intro. And, you know, if I had to pick a segment of Antonio's work or a certain period, I think, because I've given this some thought, I think that I would choose the vanity period. That was a magazine that he and introduced and produced, I think, with Anna Piaggi, and he just had a lot of freedom, and just the drawings and the covers are sublime. They're just incredible, that period of his.
But I think the reason those weren't featured in the movie is because James tried to limit himself to the late 60s up until 1976, so that was the 80s. And yeah, so that's for part two.
Yeah, also the metaphor of, you know, the AIDS epidemic and the kind of behavior that preceded that, I think it's entwined, you know, distinctly with the story of Antonio. So I think also James had that perspective.
Yeah, but definitely
want
to mention that.
Behavioral and, you know, generational kind of behavior.
That's sort of what they do in theater, you know, the tragic and the joyful. So the contrast of the tragedy that we all had to face in fashion and losing friends so vulnerable because they were so vivid, the life so full of life and so happy and free, and then just cut down like that. It's very sad. I think many people in fashion have experienced losing, you know, have touched Antonio. Or I remember doing drawings when I was in high school, and I thought, who is this person? And I love the drawings and being a part of his life, and so many people, you know, were encouraged by just looking at a touch of his imagination. And then, you know, when you make a film, you have to have the happy and the sad.
Yeah.
There's more happy, though.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an ecstatic kind of movie that definitely captures this joyfulness that you all had, and to be sort of candid, I kind of long for that. I mean, you know, it doesn't. And I wonder if you feel this, that the scene around fashion has changed. And by the way, I'd just like to point out that, first of all, Antonio is continuously referred to in fashion. So Anna Sui recently did a collection that was sort of informed by Antonio, inspired by Antonio. And Pat has still walking. I mean, she just did Tommy. Just did Tommy.
Yeah, I just did Tommy Hilfiger with Zendaya and Grace and all these girls, and we're supposed to be showing 54 and Versailles, and you know, I just did the same number I did at Versailles. You know, give me a piece of fabric and I'll show you what it can do. It's all about the fabric in fashion. It's about material, but you know, past all of that, it was about the spirit. Actually, you know, when you look at someone like Antonio and our gang, we just had the spirit. We just wanted to be something. We wanted to go through the process of learning how to live in the world with each other and dress up and make an effort. And Corey used to do my makeup, and he wouldn't let us leave the house unless we all had the coal in our eyes, and he'd grab you by the back of your head. Come here, nobody's leaving without this, and he'd make us all up, and we had that one room at, a Rue Bonaparte, and we'd all pile in there before we went out in the evening, and there was not a kitchen in the apartment, so we had to go out and eat. That's what artists do. They don't cook. And so the hungry group would just the only way we'd get a free dinner is if we dress up. You know, steak au poivre is very expensive unless you want to live on Côte Monsieur, which is very nasty. You know, those cheese sandwiches. But anyway, and we were after champagne, but nobody really drank that much, you know. So Antonio didn't drink, and anyway, Carl just lived on aspirins and Coca-Cola, and the rest of us wanted food. Didn't we want to eat? I mean, and so back to that, you know. It was just about surviving, basically, in a group. We were like this little fish pond group of fish coming in like one big body, and we'd arrive, and all the energy would change in the room. Wow. And going out to the set, set. We had our own theme songs when we came down the stairs. And we had that Apache tango dancing and war dancing. It's kind of like your group on one side of the room and the other group in tango, and see who can live through it, whose clothes didn't get ripped. Dancing so hard and
I just
living
remember
so
you
hard.
and Donna getting on those glass tables and dancing. I don't know how
Little
you did
cubes.
it. Yeah.
Slippery little cubes.
Yeah. How did you do that?
Anything to get attention.
It worked.
I just wanted to say that we were very lucky to have Bill Cunningham as our kind of staff photographer, because in those days there were people didn't walk around unless
With
you were a real
cameras.
photographer. You did not carry a camera. You didn't have a cell phone, of course, and there was no way to record a lot of things. So in a way, there's a very, very large Antonio archive because of Bill Cunningham and his dedication to Antonio and Juan's life. But had we had cell phones,
Oh, it would
had
be.
we had Instagram,
I don't know. I didn't know.
I
It
don't
would
know
be
if we
not
could
so
have lived through it.
mysterious. No, it would. That's too much work now. We didn't think about numbers of money, or we didn't think about anything. We were just thinking about dressing up and being glamorous and living what we thought the old movie stars would do in the 1920s. They didn't have all of those things. They just had each other and dancing and music and clothes and makeup, and that's all we wanted to do, is be glamorous.
it's true. Money was,
right.
well,
We just-
personally speaking, it was sort of never a goal to become rich.
It wasn't our goal,
At all. I don't
except
think
for maybe
we-
Jerry.
Yeah.
She said, "I'm going to marry." She said, "I'm going to marry the richest man in
Yeah.
the world."
And she did.
She did.
And she did. She did.
Well, what you say, you become, and we became what we wanted to be. We wanted to be stars. We all wanted to be movie stars, and that's why we were all doing this Andy Warhol movies like Vivian's Girls and L'Amour. We were trying so hard, and nobody had any cameras really, except Andy and Bill. Nobody had cameras. They were so expensive, and nobody had film. Film, you had to change it in the dark. You had to have a studio.
Corey, where did you get the ideas for the makeup? I mean, where did that come from?
I was super excited and influenced by the 1960s, because what had happened as a little child when I used to look at magazines, I remember the 1950s, and suddenly the 1960s came along, and the makeup and the hair were like Vidal Sassoon and that Peggy Moffat, and the extreme individuality of models who were in those days responsible for their own careers. There weren't makeup men. As a matter of fact, Antonio suggested that I didn't know what to do. And being around Antonio was very intimidating, because as Pat said, drawing like him, nobody would dare pick up a pencil near Antonio. You just couldn't. I mean, he was such a master. It was.
You were just awed. In awe, you would just stand and give up everything, and then so you picked up the eyeliner, the kohl. That was your pencil.
Well, he said, why don't you become a makeup man? And in those days, there were probably only 5 that I even knew of. And I said,
Didn't you tell me you used to do the corpses?
Oh, right. Well, I thought, maybe I won't be a makeup man. Maybe I'll be not an undertaker,
The artists. For the
Mortician.
Mortician.
A mortician.
Yes, because
This
I'd
is
have more.
scoop. I hope someone's getting this
It was
down.
very goth, and I felt I'd have more control, and the girls
Don't move.
The girls wouldn't fight
You would.
back.
Complain.
You would have a lot more control.
Yeah, rather than being a caveman and yanking
Well, he was
Pat,
like a caveman.
pulling
Makeup.
Pat by the hair across the room, and
You had the blue. You had the blue in there. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, so I think the 60s was a huge influence on me. And then, I was youthful and very, very attentive to every moment of what was going on around me. And I had privilege because I was able to see how the fashion
And
world
care.
was working. And people
Actually
were
care.
asking me, like YSL invited me to develop their makeup line. And I really didn't know what I was doing. But, youth is blind. Like, you just do it. And,
He was young too.
Yeah, no one really.
He wanted to hang out with us.
Well, yeah, he wanted
Remember?
the youth. I mean, it's precious, and the idea of having opportunity goes hand in hand with youth.
I remember I was interviewing Brooke Shields one time, and she said, you know, it's really different in fashion now because at the time, and she was talking about the early 80s, that brands and companies would take a risk. They would give you some space to do what you wanted to do. And now she's like, forget it. You have to, every proposal has to travel all the way up the food chain. Do you experience this so much now in fashion, yes or no? Or?
Yeah, I absolutely.
Really?
You know, all the agents and especially the thing about your numbers on your Instagram is what gets you the job. I know my daughter dropped her Instagram because she said, I'm not going to do that. I just love the art. I don't want to be a number. And, you know, I think what we had was the art. We weren't numbers. We weren't trying to impress anybody with how much we had or how powerful we were. We just wanted to be happy and be together and be social and be alive. And, you know, that was
I think
important.
it's so hard for anybody who's of a certain age, younger, to understand what it was like then. It was completely different. So to put yourself in the position of people back in the 60s and 70s is impossible for somebody who's younger. But this film helps you understand a little bit, because it's just about what Pat said.
Well, yeah, and to reiterate what Pat said, it's our identification was with the 20 or 30 years prior to us. We loved Hollywood.
Right.
We loved
Horrell and
Technicolor.
Horst.
We loved the idea of
1930s.
the star
20s.
system of people being manufactured and produced
Marlene and
in a
Dietrich.
Hollywood sort
Betty
of
Davis.
system.
Josephine
And you know, we
Baker.
were 30 years post that generation, yet that was where we drew our inspiration.
That's what we wore also. Our clothes were from the antique stores. From the 1920s, we had fur coats and beaded dresses that belonged to whoever in the 1920s.
Except Jerry Hall.
Yeah, well, she didn't have clothes. She had lingerie.
Not here.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Right.
No, it's okay. She's here.
Okay,
With a-
I have a quick question. True or false? Antonio was colorblind.
Was what?
Colorblind.
No.
No, okay. I forget who told me that when I was doing some work, that the research that they said Juan did all the coloring.
Oh, they just meant he colored the drawings, but Antonio colored the drawings too. And anything that's flat on an Antonio drawing is Juan, because it's usually cellotac. It's not
paper.
paint. So it's a film. But any gradation or anything, he certainly wasn't colorblind. That's just one of those things.
Good.
Master of color.
Glad I got that figured out.
Yeah.
Let me see, I can start asking some of these questions, because if I can read them. Glamour seems to be a common thread in the work of Warhol and Antonio. Can anyone speak to how each artist approached the notion of glamour? This is a very brainy question.
I have a little bit of an answer for that, and then I'm going to pass it on to Pat and Paul. But I think it was the superficial. It's the superficial that fascinated me. It had nothing to do with anything but what I saw superficially, and beauty, the superficiality of beauty was fascinating to me. And I think the idea of, even being an introvert as I was, the idea of turning yourself into an extrovert and putting on the mantle of glamour or the superficiality was the fascination.
I think
Yeah,
that's
we were
true.
all basically shy. You would
This
always
is
be in the
hard to
back
believe.
painting. No, really, we just wanted to burst out, come out like a butterfly. You know, we were all like caterpillars in ourselves. You know, just crawling and being But we didn't like the mundane. We were dreamers. We wanted glamour. We wanted shine. We thought if we shine ourselves up, maybe somebody would be interested in us and love us.
I
And
think we were
be happy with
deeply
us.
superficial.
No, but we liked beauty and we liked things, you know.
Yeah.
No, we were not. We were just trying to make the world more beautiful and interesting and entertaining. We were the entertainers, really. If we went out, let's see if they can see us. We're all sparkly, and maybe somebody will be happy today if we're here.
Did you have a strong sense of yourselves as Americans in Paris at that time?
Oh.
Did we what?
Did you have a strong sense of yourself as Americans in Paris?
Yeah, we took over.
totally-
Okay.
It was like, you owe us. We saved you. And we used to go to Berlin and sing that song in the airplane with Nancy North, and all of us, we would be singing in the airplanes. Oh, they'd put you in jail now for the stuff we did when we traveled. And what was that train we used to take to the
Train Bleu.
Train Bleu? We were traveling in style, always first class, and lots of luggage and diamonds. And
Thanks to Carl.
Thanks to Carl.
I think it's true, but we were expats. But the unfortunate thing is that we never spoke French among ourselves, and that's why it was so easy to get along with Carl, because he was, trilingual, understood all the nuances of what we were saying. And Antonio and Juan never bothered to learn French. Paul was the only one that spoke properly. He was our translator. It's only till now, the last 2 years, that I finally take French classes at the Alliance Française. And I'm a terrible student. It just was never something that I had to do.
But we lived in the American area, Saint-Germain, so we were like parading around as though we owned France. We owned France. Yeah, and they loved us for that because we were brave. We had no fear. We were bold, We could sing, we could dance. We had music that they didn't have.
Oh, right.
We brought all of that American James Brown and everything, Marvin Gaye, and people were falling in love with our music and our dance moves.
Curtis Mayfield.
Curtis Mayfield.
Eddie
Now,
Kendrick.
the other thing
Kendrick.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, my bad. The movie doesn't even really touch on this at all, but Paul and Juan were, of course, from Puerto Rico. Was there any kind of, I don't know, was there an awareness of that? Was there friction around that? I know, Pat, actually, you said you left the United States and you said you didn't want to come back until there was an African-American woman on the cover of Vogue, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then Beverly.
Beverly, just saw her in Paris.
She
had the opportunity, but that was so much later.
Yeah.
It was 8 years later.
Yeah.
It took 8 years. It's like, the number 7 and another 7,
Yeah.
But what did you mean about Puerto Rico?
Well, I just was wondering, was there, did they feel in any way outsiders to the fashion scene or not?
I just remember that Juan would mock his Puerto Rican descent by singing all the songs from West Side Story.
Oh, yeah, we'd always do.
They were connected, but it was never really like an issue.
The
they were
songs from
glamorous.
West Side Story are a mockery. I mean, it's an artifice. And Juan deeply loved Puerto Rican songs. He would play Toña La Negra like constantly.
And we'd eat those platanos every day.
Yeah, and the food, of course.
The food, Chinese, Cuban food.
So in that sense, I think, Antonio's favorite restaurant was La Chinita, which is,
Is it still there?
It wasn't as if there was a denial, but as you said, they were New Yorkers.
Yeah, they were New Yorkers.
I mean, they were
New Yorkers,
really.
New
Yorkers.
I stand by it.
But they could speak Spanish. But
Okay.
they never spoke Spanish
Never.
around.
No,
They didn't speak Spanish. Okay.
No, they never
I
did.
mean, not
around
amongst
us.
They knew how to,
But they never did.
they didn't use it.
I have a question. Is there an Antonio of the 21st century, someone whose artistry and energy shapes fashion and style? Now, I'm assuming that this person means maybe it's not an illustrator, but
Yeah, that could be. It might be an actor, or I'm not sure.
someone who created a
Someone on
scene
Instagram.
and inspired other people to be creative too, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe the audience knows someone.
Yes, tell us.
Shout it out.
Follow
Who is it?
them.
Who is it?
I think fashion's so complex now, and there's so many jobs for everyone, that there's no one person in the
Stylists are more like Patty Wilson, people like people from Love Magazine. Stylists seem to be like the illustrators because they're working with the photographers. But as far as illustrators,
the only one I would mention is David Danton.
Oh,
who
yeah,
I
he's in
find
England.
to be an extraordinary
He's very good.
illustrator.
Yeah,
But he's not a dynamic creator of anything.
And he doesn't have an entourage
He's not an influence in that way. He's just a very, very good artist.
creating,
technique.
and changing
And
the
still
world.
being a fashion illustrator, which is very, very rare.
It's hard to have that full time.
Yeah,
Maybe a singer, maybe, I don't know, somebody.
Someone who, brings people. I was thinking, this person is maybe is not as famous now, but someone like Ruben Toledo would be, a good, really good
coming up.
Yeah, they were.
He admires
both of them.
Antonio. Oh, yeah, they're
because
fantastic.
they're a team. They cover a lot of bases.
Yeah, they're a team.
What is your fave and memory of Antonio, or your fave project?
Favorite? Did you say?
Yeah. Your favorite memory of Antonio.
Wow. The whole
You can
thing.
take that one.
Oh.
The whole thing about, I just remember arriving in Paris and all of us sleeping in that one-room apartment together, like in sleeping bags, and Antonio and Juan on the floor, and me and Donna in the bed, nose to toe, and waking up and right away getting to the drawing, and Corey coming over and, making sure we looked good, and,
Is
then
that,
later
is that
when
where
we
the
were...
pictures were taken? Those black and white pictures where Antonio's
Yes,
got the
with
flute?
the flute.
Yeah.
It was very intimate. I mean, it was really at the beginning. Then we'd go out and have some food and drink that funny green drink that could kill you.
Oh, absinthe.
Absinthe. Yeah. It can kill you.
We had to, because all the artists do it, We say, here we go. Oh, I'm not drinking. Okay.
Someone is in, maybe this is a student, is asking, do you think great fashion illustrators can exist in today's society? And if so, I guess what is your advice on how to, they say, what is your advice? I'll just leave it there. What is your advice?
Paint the people you know and make them gorgeous. Because every face is a beautiful face. It's how you see it, and what you put on it. Because clothes don't mean anything unless there's a spirit behind it,
That sounds good.
But you're the painter.
Yeah, but
You're an amazing painter.
But you can't give advice on that. You just have it. If you have it in you, you just do it. It's not something you can control, and you can't tell somebody what to do.
Yeah, you can't control it. You just say, oh no, I have to paint again. It's like you wake up and you say, oh no, I have to paint. Okay.
Yeah, you don't even think, you just do it. But I never, I tried to be a teacher. I taught at NYU for a while, and it's very hard to teach art. I just think you can teach methods, or you can teach the history of art, which is what I taught. But to actually teach someone how to paint or how to draw is impossible. You can tell them how you draw and then do it the way I do it, but...
Tell them to go get possessed by it. That's it, basically. That's basically the whole situation. Is something.
Well, I noticed you've been painting a lot.
I've been painting also, thanks to your inspiration with all of your sketches.
Mutual admiration.
And he's always encouraging everybody. He says, you have to go to the class and draw. And I figured, you're, inspiring people, I think, is very important.
I think so.
That's what art is all about, basically.
I inspire by example.
Yeah, by example.
Yeah.
Like how you see the world. Now, because of your paintings, I see the sky. I never really saw the sky like that before.
It's interesting.
You've got to see his work.
Paul,
Paul's work.
Considering that you'd had this obviously very important experience in your background, that I haven't looked at all your work, but they're not often people in your paintings.
Well, I usually, not in my paintings, no. I usually reserve my people for drawings because in the last 10 years I've been drawing people. Since Antonio died, I feel liberated.
And say that.
Yeah, I know.
Because like they said in the movie, when you see somebody draw that way, I mean, I used to draw with Antonio. I used to draw the model with him, but it wasn't the same. Now, when I go and draw people, I feel a bit freer.
Because you were in the back room making deserts and scenes, like huge paintings of landscapes, and he's in the darkest room in the house painting the brightest sky you've ever seen. And Antonio's in the other room with 100 people dancing. So now I can understand why you want to do people.
Yeah,
but following Paul now and seeing his drawings, is that what you call them?
Well, they're watercolor. Yeah.
They're the most I don't know where that came from, because I didn't know that about
I don't know where it came from either.
And they're the most amazing,
liberated.
sharpest, most interesting, figurative, which I love,
Thank you, Corey.
drawings. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Paul, I think you're going to pick up some followers on your Instagram tonight.
please.
So
Paul
Please
Caranicas.
follow him.
I better start
You'll get
posting
really
again.
inspired.
all three of these people have great Instagrams. This is not a question. It's just Pat, I love. And Pat, I love. Say hello to Twarma.
Twarma? Hello. Hello. Where are you? Oh, hello. 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 I see you.
Did I say that right? Twarma?
I see you.
It's Twarma.
Twarma. Yeah. Hi. Hi.
Okay, let's do. We'll do one more question. Then, if people want to stick around, they can. What? Well, maybe you've answered this already, but maybe not. What advice would Antonio give to young creative people?
Come here, let me draw you.
That's not advice.
I used to watch Antonio give people advice when, like, for instance, a class from FIT would come to the studio, and if he didn't think they had potential, he would tell them immediately, don't do that. You're never going to make it. Forget it. And he would tell them what to do. So I think on an individual, one-on-one basis, you can tell people. I don't think there's a general thing you can say that, that Antonio would say to people besides follow what you feel. And if I'm not around to tell you that you're good at it, then figure it out. I think that's what he would want them to know.
Other thoughts?
I think he would say, do you know what you're doing? Because he had this little logical twist sometimes, like, what are you doing?
What about Juan? What would Juan say?
I think like what was focused on in the movie also is that Antonio saw into people what they couldn't see themselves. And so his intuitiveness, as referred to by his father, who was a psychic, perhaps he would be able to see the talent that we all have and be able to introduce ourselves.
Oh yeah, he would
to
see their talent. He would tell them, you should be a hairdresser. That's what he did with Leslie Lopez.
You should be a makeup.
You should be a makeup artist. And Mundi, you should design shoes. I mean, he would find their strength and he would say, play to that. And if they drew well, he would say, you should be an illustrator or a designer.
Okay.
You know what you should do, he would say. Do you know what you should do? Remember he used to say that?
Yeah, it would be sort of like that.
Paul, Pat, and Corey, thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank you.
for coming. And thank you all for coming and enjoying. That's it.
Thank you.